This is Subnautica. Released in late 2014, it was a new game. Not just in its timeliness, but in gameplay as well. An open world set deep into the unknown, alien to us, yet strangely familiar in nature. You explore this world, gleaming with life, and stretch your arm out into its enchanting beauty. The only limit to your journey across this place is yourself. Pure freedom. It's supposed to be a new experience, one that entrances the player in a place they will never go. But something doesn't feel right. The game becomes eerie the more you explore its vast ocean, and this freedom is soon locked away by a feeling of uncertainty, given by the realization that beneath you, a dark void has replaced the colorful sand that once was. You are thrown into a scene of chaos. Fire, sparks, danger. The situation calms, and once you begin in earnest, you leave. The feeling of dread when I exited the pod for the first time was one like no other. There was ocean for as far as the eye can see, except for a burning remnant of the broken vehicle I arrived in, sunken in the distance. Let's explore. The water's inviting, clear and filled with new and exciting life. Fish swim, plants sway in the current, and yet something feels off. And the second you step into the water, this sense of anxiousness knowing that you inhabit an area naturally inhospitable to you is overbearingly present. We see living, moving creatures bigger than us all around, and coupled with the fact that we don't know what they're capable of, naturally makes you at the very least wary of your surroundings. As you progress through the game, we collect and scan objects salvaged from the wreck of your ship and slowly explore around you. At some point you leave the safe shallows to explore the surrounding biomes, passing through the kelp forest and eventually the grassy plateaus. Despite the naturally hostile environment and occasionally aggressive fauna, sometimes you can't help but get caught up in the exploration aspect and forget about your precarious situation. And yet every so often you encounter something that presents the word terror. In addition to this, distress calls are soon sent out, and this gives you hope that maybe your loneliness will end, but also communicates with you the true danger of the world you inhabit. Despite the fact that you are free to move wherever you want, something in the back of your mind tells you to just stay back and continue in the borders of familiarity. At some point you explore, involved with gathering resources, or exploring a crew pod, or seeing life, and before you can react, you see nothing. Pitch black, total darkness. The bright and scintillating water has now turned into a black abyss, devoid of any light, color, or movement. You can't see, and that is the scary part. Before now, sight was one of the two senses you had. It allowed you to perceive danger, as well as resources. With it, you could move freely and consciously, but now that has been taken away from you. There's a special feeling that goes along with this, impossible to describe with words. It's truly petrifying. When darkness surrounds you in water, you are left with sound as your only perception of the world. The sounds in this game are bone-chilling. What I mean is the ambience is so little disturbed by any distinct noise that when it is, the hairs on your back can't help but raise. Knowing that danger is all around you, that the fight for survival is all-encompassing, brings about a temperamental state, and to you anything that could be danger is. In this game, a large part of one's experience is dedicated to the exploration of life, and its most striking form is that of the Leviathan class, looming creatures many times the size of the player, rivaling the inanimate properties of the landscape they inhabit. Suffice it to say, these animals only serve to stress out the player. For example, in my mind the most terrifying of these creatures is that of the Reaper Leviathan. They can be found in many places, but generally stay within the confines of the Dunes biome. While not the largest Leviathan, it still dwarfs the player, and still endangers you as you sit in a submarine. The Reaper Leviathan snakes around the environment and will sneak up on the unsuspecting player before grabbing them and presumably devouring them whole. The experience of being caught isn't really the worst part, but the suspense leading up to it. Knowing you are in the presence of a life-ending creature, and hearing its roar is what is truly terrifying. Spotting one and being aware of it puts the player on edge and creates an extremely tense atmosphere, reminiscent of the Five Nights at Freddy's game series. Now I know one would be hard-pressed to find parallels between the two games, but both make great use of an anxious atmosphere. In Five Nights at Freddy's, everything starts out safe, but as time passes things get worse. Your power decreases, and tracking all the animatronics becomes very difficult. In Subnautica, by entering the dunes, the clock is ticking. Then you hear the Reaper, and shortly thereafter you can see it. The tension rises until it spikes at a point where you can no longer hear or see it. This is the most nerve-wracking part because you know it is there, and you know it knows you are there, but you don't know exactly where it is. Then you are either caught or you leave, dropping the tension altogether. And the cycle repeats itself. There are passive Leviathans, but even so, these only serve to make things more disturbing. Take, for instance, the Reefback. This Leviathan is a large creature, tied for the third largest in the game. Slow-moving and smooth, it is reminiscent of a large humpback whale, especially with the sounds it makes, and thus produces an unnerving feeling. Swimming in the water, it glides over a dark canyon. The relatively shallow depths of the area directly surrounding your spawn point can be unsettling in their own right. But that signature decomposition you feel in the ocean comes from the depths beneath you. The simple answer is that most people are naturally afraid of the ocean. We as humans are not truly built to inhabit water full time, and you would be certainly aware of that fact by the time you play this game. You fear the water in Subnautica just as you would be 5,000 miles away from land in the middle of the Pacific. But what if you get used to it? What if after playing the game for some time you become accustomed to knowing that you're in the water, and it's perfectly normal in this world? And yet, sometimes it can still be uncomfortable. There's more. In the natural progression of the game, there is an island you must travel to in order to fulfill the storyline. In order to reach that island, you must swim, or use a vehicle. As with everything else in this game, it lies in the middle of the ocean. You can either skim the surface or do the thing everybody tells you not to do. Look down. In reality, the island lies in the midst of the deep Grand Reef, the third largest biome in the game, and does, which the name suggests, have a maximum depth of 650 meters, well below what you are able to observe from the surface. It is quite strange, but Generally, when looking down, you feel anxious, like something isn't right. Why would the game put the island so far out in an area far beyond your reach? It does this in order to inhibit your senses. Let me explain. The human reaction of nervousness does not come from direct confrontation. In that scenario, you are more likely to feel a rush of energy and focus as adrenaline pumps through you, preparing you for some kind of fight or other hazard. But if you don't know exactly what you're up against, there is nothing to prepare for. It plays tricks on your mind with you knowing, having most likely encountered a Reaper Leviathan previously, that there is danger around. You have to prepare for anything, but nothing in particular. The part of your brain that recognizes danger pretty much fries, and you are left with that uncomfortable feeling. And now, we are brought to the mental aspect of the game. You are alone. There is no other thing that is sentient, or will help you, or will do anything but survive, just like you. Adding to this feeling is the scent of radio calls sent by other life pods. After the ship you arrived in crashed, other life pods were scattered across the ocean floor, and as the game progresses, you receive SOS signals from each and every one, and every single time you reach them, there is nobody there. Not only that, but a call from the mothership makes it clear that they have no idea exactly how dire the situation is. On top of that, as soon as they arrive on the planet, their ship is blown up entirely, and you are alone once again. It's like the game wants you to feel lonely, which is of course exactly what it's trying to do. The game wants you to realize in full that you are a finite object in the middle of an ocean, in the middle of an unexplored planet, in the middle of space, and nobody is coming to rescue you. This loneliness contributes to an overall mental state, one of deliriousness and dread. Struck upon an alien world with life-threatening fauna and an inhospitable environment, it doesn't take long before a feeling of apprehension sits in. There is nobody to communicate with, and you know if things go awry, there will be no salvation. It captures perfectly the feeling of thalassophobia, or the fear of the ocean. It's the lack of senses in the middle of the depths that gives this fear. There is no way to know anything. You can't feel the seafloor, nor see anything but darkness, nor know where that weird sound is coming from. All of these things contribute to one main goal: to immerse the player. When including all of our senses down to the innermost parts of our being, the game feels like real life, which is what really does it. Every single detail is accounted for. An example is the quality of the water, but more specifically, this rotund feature right here. This exists in real life and is called Snell's window, a phenomenon in which light entering the water refracts into a circle exactly 96 degrees wide before entering your eyes. Governed by Snell's law and equation, this game has everything. Knowing that this is just a game, you still feel creeped out because you become immersed in the gameplay. Even if you know it isn't real, it still feels real. The sounds, the sights, the locations, the isolated feeling. It all leads you to forget about your ability to just turn off the game. It feels like you can't. It feels like you are in the ocean. And when it comes down to it, this game is really attempting to mimic our ocean, and includes everything we may see when diving beneath the waves, including that crippling loneliness and vast array of life. But not everything is the same, like the alienation of the fauna or the lack of islands in the water. and so everything falls into a limbo, or an uncanny valley, if you will. The uncanny valley is an idea that between clearly unrealistic and cartoonish depictions and real life sits an area in which something isn't quite real, but is too lifelike to be definitively fake, almost as though we are being tricked. This puts us on edge, and gives us that eerie feeling whenever we look at animatronics or see an artificial space that looks like somewhere we've been. I'm certain I've seen animals like that before, but not exactly like that animal. And I'm even more certain it does not exist in our world. So what is it? Not only this, but we are immersed in it, and that is why this game feels so terrifying, is the fact that despite everything we know about it, and that we know it is just a video game, being put into something that feels like real life might as well be. Even after you discover the harmlessness of the source, the utter loneliness of your situation makes it impossible to ever truly brush aside the distant roar of a wreathback Leviathan.